Janelle straightened in her chair, her hands resting firmly on the table. When the executive in charge finally turned to her, asking for her input, she took a slow breath. "Well," she started, keeping her voice even, "if this airline is serious about diversity, let's talk about what that actually looks like." The room quieted. Janelle could feel their attention shifting. Some looked interested, others wary. A few glanced at each other, silently calculating whether this was a conversation they actually wanted to have. She leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk about hiring, promotion pathways, bias in training programs. Let's talk about the fact that I had to fight to get through the front door of my own airline's headquarters today, while two of my colleagues walked in without so much as a second glance." A flicker of discomfort passed through the faces around the table. The executive who had asked her to speak cleared his throat. I'm not sure what you mean." Janelle tilted her head. "I think you do." She reached into her bag, pulling out a neatly organized folder and sliding it across the table. "But just in case, here's what I mean. Documented. In detail. Names, dates, incidents." One of the board members picked it up, flipping through the pages. Their expression shifted as they read. Others leaned in, curiosity replacing hesitation. Janelle watched them carefully. She had no illusions that one meeting would change everything. She knew better. But this wasn't just about today. It was about every time she had been dismissed, doubted, or ignored. Every time someone had questioned her place in a space she had more than earned. Nightmare, this was accountability finally catching up to them. Janelle had spent her entire career being dismissed, doubted, and forced to prove herself in ways her colleagues never had to. She had watched others rise through the ranks with half her experience, seen policies change on paper but never in practice. She had taken every slight, every obstacle, and turned it into fuel. But this was bigger than her. By the end of the week, the airline's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Former employees were coming forward with receipts, emails, recorded conversations, performance reviews that showed undeniable bias. Advocacy groups had taken notice. Lawyers specializing in workplace discrimination reached out, offering their support. The pressure was no longer coming from just one pilot with a folder full of proof. It was coming from every angle, from people who had been ignored for too long. Janelle knew how corporations operated. First came the vague statements, then the internal investigations. Next, the desperate attempts at damage control. And finally, the real reckoning, the one they never saw coming. The airline CEO, a man she had only seen in promotional videos about company culture, was now making emergency media appearances, assuring the public that significant steps were being taken. But it was too late. The truth was out. A week after she had pressed send on that email, Janelle found herself sitting in a high-rise office, not at her airline's headquarters, but across from a team of lawyers who were ready to take this case as far as it needed to go. The evidence spoke for itself. The stories pouring in were undeniable. And the airline, they were officially out of places to hide. She thought about that moment at the front desk, the receptionist dismissing her, the security guard treating her like a trespasser, the quiet humiliation of having to fight for her right to be in a space she had already earned. That moment wasn't just a mistake. It was a reflection of a system that had never expected someone like her to push back. But they had underestimated her. The airline scrambled, desperately trying to get ahead of the damage. Their legal team rushed to draft carefully worded statements, full of corporate jargon about misunderstandings and isolated incidents. They called in diversity consultants, made public pledges, and even went as far as flashing photos of their one black executive at every opportunity, as if that alone could erase the storm that was coming. But none of it worked. The lawsuits had already been filed, and Janelle wasn't the only one standing at the front lines. Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, people from every level of the company, began stepping forward with their own stories, armed with proof. Pay disparities. Promotions that mysteriously never materialized. Complaints buried so deep they were never meant to see daylight. The airline had spent years pretending these problems didn't exist, silencing those who dared to speak up. But now the silence was shattered. And then came the final blow. A leaked internal email. A message between two senior executives, mocking the backlash. Let her scream into the void. This will blow over like it always does. Except this time it didn't. The email spread like wildfire. News anchors dissected every single word. Social media erupted with hashtags demanding accountability. Stock prices plummeted. Corporate sponsors distanced themselves, not wanting their names tied to the growing scandal. Passengers canceled flights in protest, refusing to support an airline that had so openly dismissed its employees' voices. And then one morning the CEO, the same man who had ignored Janelle's concerns for years, the one who had brushed off every red flag, resigned. Effective immediately. But it was far too late. The airline's reputation had already been gutted beyond repair. One by one, investors began cutting ties, unwilling to risk their money on a sinking ship. The company's board scrambled to restructure, trying to salvage what was left, but the damage ran too deep. Months later, the headline sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. Major U.S. airline files for bankruptcy amid discrimination scandal. The airline that had dismissed her. The airline that had tried to silence her. The airline that had once made her fight just to be seen as an equal, was now gone. But Janelle, she wasn't done. She hadn't fought this battle just to watch history repeat itself. She hadn't risked everything just to see another airline rise up and make the same mistakes. She had bigger plans. Janelle stood at the front of the conference hall, scanning the crowd in front of her. The faces looking back at her weren't just black. They were Latina, Asian, Indigenous, men and women. Young pilots fresh out of flight school, eyes filled with hope. Veterans of the industry, carrying the same battle scars she did. Every single one of them had a story. Every single one of them had faced their own version of what she had endured. She took a deep breath and smiled. I used to believe that if I kept my head down, worked twice as hard, and proved myself over and over again, things would change, she said, her voice clear and steady. She let the words settle, then continued. But I learned the hard way. Silence doesn't fix broken systems. And when one of us speaks up, we give others the courage to do the same. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just a speech. It was the beginning of something bigger. With the settlement money from the lawsuit and the backing of other pilots, Janelle had co-founded something that would outlast any one airline, any one scandal. A real aviation diversity initiative. Not some PR stunt, not a corporate checklist. A real program. One that provided scholarships, mentorships, legal protection for underrepresented pilots. One that demanded accountability from airlines. One that made sure no black pilot would ever have to fight just to be recognized as worthy again. Janelle looked out at the crowd, at the faces filled with determination, with hope, with power. We didn't just bring down an airline, she said. We changed the industry. Beat of silence. Then thunderous applause. And for the first time in a long, long time, Janelle felt something she hadn't dared believe in before. Not just justice. Real. Lasting. Change.